Hello, this is JIGHEAD TV, and our topic today is how to choose a braided line, and what is the braided line, and what is the best braided line you can use for your fishing, and how to choose them, and how to take care of your line. Back in the days, one of the main lines that was used by fishermen was a monoline, nylon lines, and today one of the biggest and most used lines are braided lines, and the braided lines are coming in different variations and becoming more popular among sport fishermen and recreational fishermen, and even some of the commercial fishermen. So what is the main thing behind the braided line? Braided line is a line that is made out of threads and joined into one braid, and it's a different number of threads, 3, 4, 8 or 12 threads joined into one braided line. And what are the main advantages of the braided line over the traditional mono or nylon lines? One of the biggest advantage that the braided line has is the very low stretch of the line. If you compare the old lines, that mono and nylon lines, they had a very long stretch, and this affects the sensitivity and affects the striking the hook, and at the same time the casting distance of your lure. The stretch makes complications while you are casting, because when you cast it stretches a long way, and then you don't have enough power. You know, the whole power is just stretched over the line, and you don't have enough power to cast it long enough. And when you're setting the hook, you will have to do much more harder strike, much more harder hook setup in order to get the hook penetrate the jaws of the fish. When the braided line has a much more less stretch, and when you're setting the hook, braided line has a more advantage, because when you're setting the hook and there is no stretch, and it will set the hook very fast and penetrate the jaws of the fish in a split of a second. The second advantage of the braided line is that the braided line made out of threads of different type of polyethylene threads into one braid, so which gives and creates much more breaking resistance to the line. So for example, if we compare it to the traditional mono and nylon lines, the braided lines has 2 times or 3 times more breaking point than the traditional lines. The third advantage is that you can use the braided line for a longer period of time, and if you take a proper care, which we will talk about it later in the video. The next advantage of the braided line is that it's very light and thin comparing to the traditional lines. For example, if we take traditional lines in the same diameter and compare it to the braided line, the braided line will have much more power and much more resistance comparing to the traditional lines. And the braided lines usually comes in a different types, colors, variations, and all of them have a specific meaning. All of them have a specific idea behind it, and let's explain that more in depth. Braided lines comes in different variations, different colors, different types, and different diameters. So to understand and to know what exactly you need, we will go in a basic through each one of them. First one, of course, is the color. Many people are asking what is the best color of the braided line that we have to use, and the color is in general is the preference of the angler, because some people they need brighter colors of the line, like this one for example, so they can track the line and they can see how the line performs, maybe to if they can see some kind of different small actions or small bites done by very sensitive fish, but very like slow biting fish, and they need to see to have a contrast between the water and the whole surrounding, and they can see and understand where their line is. Some lines come in very simple colors like gray color or brownish color or dark green color. These lines are mostly used in freshwater situations when many people are not using fluorocarbon leaders, and they use directly attaching lines to the hook or to the snap, and they use it as a camouflage so fish cannot see the braided line itself. And then we have some lines are coming in a multicolor, in a different colors. Usually this is as a guide for you to understand what is the distance you are casting or how many, and many of them are coming in a jigging series, because you can know by color how many meters deep you can go. For example, as a simple example, I will say like each color usually by manufacturers are done like each color is 10 meters. And one of the examples we had when we were searching for long tail tunas, and the captain was checking on the scanner and looking for the fish, and then he told us, okay, there is a school of fish at the depth of 60 meters, and the total depth under the boat is around 150 meters. So what you will do with this multicolor, so you drop only 6 colors and you will reach the 60 meters exactly, which will help you to perfectly be near the school of the fish. So that's why mostly the jigging, vertical jigging from the boat is done by multicolored braids, so you know where to drop your jig exactly. Or for shore usage is usually used when you want to really know what's the distance you are casting, or keep casting on the same distance. For example, like after 5 colors you just stop your cast and it will drop on the 50 meters, or after 6 colors 60 meters, and at the same time you can know approximate depth of the area you are fishing. So the multicolor is usually done for measuring purposes, and all this is done by manufacturers for different anglers, for different preferences, and you have to understand what exactly is more suitable for your situation. Some people prefer orange color, some people prefer green color. That's all completely personal preference. The second thing that you can see through the braided line, when you're purchasing braided line, some of the braided lines are marked as casting, some of them marked as jigging, some of them are marked as EG, some of them marked as sea bass, and the question is, how do you know which one is the more suitable for you? So usually when they mention casting and sea bass, this is one of the lines that you want to go for, because these lines are mainly made for casting. Casting and the shore jigging together, it's not differentiated, because there is no specific line saying that the shore jigging, unless there is some manufacturers created that kind of line. But in general, you know, casting and the C-bus type of lines are the mostly used for casting from shores and on the boats. And there is a line called EG, and the main idea behind that line sinks faster than any other line. So if you're using sinking lures, for example, you might consider getting yourself EG line, because it will sink faster than any other casting line. And there is also jigging lines, the ones that are usually marked as jigging. These lines are usually used in a vertical jigging from boats, and they mostly come in multicolor. Some of them come in one color only. And what's the difference between them? Usually jigging lines a bit more you know, tougher than the casting lines. Casting lines usually a bit softer, because you need to cast it and it should be more flexible. And the jigging lines are usually, because of the vertical jigging, they have a specific type of material, you know, infused in the, you know, specific type of liquids used, which makes this line a bit tougher, and which makes more straighter, you know, when you are jigging vertically. So that's the difference between jigging and casting lines. The next I wanted to talk about, the main idea is what type of line to choose, and about the diameters of the lines. And the most important part of choosing a braided line, and I think it's the most confusing part for many anglers, and what braided line to choose. And the main thing that are people looking at is the diameters of the line and the breaking point of the line. So how many kgs or how many lbs. Usually it's mostly mentioned in lbs. How many pounds or how many kgs this line can stand. Usually whatever is mentioned there is the direct power, direct strength of the fish or fight or any weight, you know, like after which the braided line will break. And today, in for example, in different markets there is a different markings. For example, in Europe, mostly it's mentioned in diameters. People are used to diameters. In States, mostly in lbs and then the diameters. And in Japanese market, there is a way of measuring it. It's called PE measurement, which is taken from old traditional Japanese method of measuring diameter of the silk threads, and it's called gao or something similar to that. And that's how the PE rating came out. So we have the rating of PEs, you know, like if you've noticed, many of the lines, they have the numbers like number 1, number 2, 0.6, 0.8, number 3, number 6, and goes on up to PE 20, PE 16, PE 18, you know. And how do we understand that markings and how to choose the best line for us? So basically PE is a measurement of a diameter. So if we say, for example, PE 0.6 is 0.128 millimeters, and PE 1, for example, is 0.165 millimeters, and PE 2 is 0.235, and goes on. You will see the list here of all the PE measurements. And so PE is a diameter, basic as it is, you know, like it's very simple. So 1 PE is specific diameter, 2 PE is specific diameter, and usually it goes the same way through all the manufacturers. And the main thing is, the difference here is how the braided lines are made, how many threads used, and what kind of technology used. Some of them are kept in a very secret, you know, so different manufacturers, they have different types and different ways of producing their braided lines. And of course, the they will have different breaking point for each of this number of PEs, you know. So but the simplest way, the very rough way and the very easy way to understand what exactly the PE is, so there is one small formula, and which is usually was used basically for 4x lines, the lines with the 4 braids, 4 threads into one braid. So it's a measurement, it's a number of PE multiplied by 10. So if you, for example, if you multiply number 1 by 10, it will become 10, which is approximately 10 lb. So that the meaning is that this line will stand minimum of 10 lb. If it's 2 PE multiplied by 10, that means it's 20 lb. And so it goes on. For each PE, you just multiply it by 10, and you will know how many lb the minimum measurement for that line. But this was made basically for 3x and 4x line. But now we have lines which are 8x and 12x and even 16x these days. But the most popular right now, of course, is 8x, and 4x still are very popular. 4x is popular because of the price, and 8x is popular because of the breaking point which it has. And easier way to measure for your breaking point for the 8x lines is multiplying the number of PE by 15. Of course, this is very rough formula and this is very rough measurement, but this will give you minimum understanding of what's exactly the, for example, if we see number 1 PE here, I have 1 PE, the diameter will be similar in all the different manufacturers, but the breaking resistance for me, if we calculate it by formula, so 1 multiplied by 15, we multiply it by 15, and for me will be minimum of 15 lb breaking point. And if we see here, manufacturer mentions 16.5 lb. That means they have some specific formula or something added to the braided line which makes it a bit more, but our formula works that the minimum for it is a 15 lb. So these formulas are very easy, if you remember them, very easy to calculate. If someone tells you, okay, I'm using line 2 PE, and you will directly understand, so this is approximately 30, minimum of 30 lb line. And that's what I wanted to explain regarding the PE, because PE measurement is very easy to use and to understand, you know, especially when you're purchasing the lines. You don't have to go by diameters, you know, understand to know all the, if the manufacturer mentions number 1, you directly, you know, if it's X8 line, that will be multiplied by 15, and if it's a X4 line, it will be multiplied by 10. This is very rough, very simple, but it will give you some understanding of how to measure the lines and understand what is the best you can do with that line. And the next, let's talk about what kind of line you need to choose specifically for shore fishing, and we will go also for boat fishing to understand what type of fish, what type of lines you will need. So now let's explain and understand what type of line you will need for different type of fishing. So of course, you know, the main thing here is that different type of fishing will require different type of line, and different type of fish will require different type of line. So I will go just basically through all of the popular type of fishing and explain what are the type of lines used for each one. Of course, first of all, the first criteria that we will have to look at is your rod, because your rod will mention specific type of lines. Mostly they mention what kind of lines you can use, and so you don't exceed or you don't go less than the minimum suggested line test for that specific rod. But in general, I would categorize the lines that you will need, and I will mention them in PE because it's a easiest way to measure them and to understand, and for you it will be easiest way to find out what is the exactly LB. You can use the formula to understand how many LB is that. I will be using PE rating because I always use PE rating, and it's much more easier, and once you get used to it, it's much more easier for you also to just classify what exactly you require. So for ultralight fishing, mostly we will go from specifically for sea. I'm not talking about freshwater. Freshwater you can go much more less numbers, but we are talking about seashore fishing, and for ultralight I would go from somewhere 0.4 up to 0.8 PE lines, which is approximately 9 LB, 10 LB maximum of breaking point. And these lines are used for lighter fish with the very light gear, up to 7 gram, up to 8 gram. So you have maximum sensitivity, and you can cast very low and very small baits for very long distances, and still can manage land a decent sized fish with that. And because your rods are very light and sensitive, you would have to use very sensitive lines for that. So 0.4 up to 0.8, this is the best measurement in PEs, of course, best measurement for ultralight gear. For light gear, for the rods up to, let's say, 15-18 gram, I would suggest using something from 0.8. Some people might use starting from 0.6 also, but 0.8 is a good start. So you can catch bigger fish, more than decent sized fish, and still fight with it properly. And 0.8 up to 0.8 up to 1.2 PE approximately. This is going to be the best type of lines in diameters, and 1.2 PE, that's going to be around 0.185 millimeters. You don't need more than that, because if you go more, you will lose the sensitivity. This will be the best perfect numbers for the light gear up to 18, up to 20 gram. And if we are going to from medium to heavy, so this is for the rods up to 35, up to 45 gram, and this will be a good, when you start catching a bigger size fish, or you are casting a heavier bait for the longer distances, and you're using, for example, heavier rods, then we will go from 1.2 PE up to 2.5 PE. Of course, everything will matter on what type of lure you cast, what type of distances you want, and what type of rod you are using. And 2.5 I would say is the max for shore fishing, because the thicker the line is, you will have more sailing effect while casting if you have a side wind or something. And then when you're playing your lure, it will give you much more resistance. So the thinner the line, the more sensitivity you have, the more action you can do with your bait and with your lures and with your jigs. And if we are going for heavy to extra heavy stuff, like we are casting really heavy, for example, poppers of 30-40 gram, or some kind of baits, the stick baits or whatever, like 60-50 gram, when you're casting really heavy stuff, extra heavy, we would say, then I would suggest going from 2 to 3 PE. This is for, we are talking about shore fishing right now, and this will be decent size of braid to cast a heavy lure. And at the same time, heavy lure means you might catch a really big fish. So it will give you advantage of fighting that kind of fish from the shore. If we are talking about boat, and if we are, for example, there is in UAE, in our example of our place, we have East Coast and we have West Coast. So West Coast we will take as Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Ras Al Khaimah, Sharjah, Ajman areas. These areas are not very deep, and the most you know, like the deepest areas I would say is about 30, 35 or 40 meters. And for that you would not require anything more than 2 PE for sure, because you know, like especially like if you're targeting trivalis, different type of trivalis or emperors, sherry we say it in Arabic, and then different type of breams. Anything from 0.6 up to 1.2 PE would be perfect, because you will be using much more lighter, especially in the shallows. You will be using much more lighter gear, and the bigger your line, the more resistance you're gonna have, especially on the vertical jigging. The currents will give you much more resistance, and it will have much more sailing effect. If you're of course using heavier lines and targeting a bigger fish, I would suggest going from 1.5 to 2 PE. This will be the most perfect and most sensitive lines. If we are talking about East Coast and you are going, for example, on a different charters, fighting, you know, looking for a different fish like mahis, longtail tunas, rainbow runners, or even yellowfin tunas, then we are talking about the braids which are minimum of 2 PE and above. And of course, you know, when you're going on charters and the time is limited and you have friends with you and you don't want to waste time, you know, of course you can try to fight a fish on 0.8 PE, but you have to be also understanding, you know, and be respectful to other anglers, because they want to catch fish too. And the faster you bring the fish, the more fish, the chance you have to catch the other fish. So I would suggest, if you are going on trips in Fujairah or anywhere in Oman or Dibba areas, on the boat trips, try to use 2.5, 3 PE minimum, so you can bring the fish out faster and let your friends also enjoy fishing, you know, like that's and if we are going for bigger tunas, then we are talking about lines of 5, 6, 7 PE, 8 PE, this type of lines. And this is basic explanation and breakdown of what kind of lines you would use for shore and boat fishing in our areas. And next, let's talk about how to take care of your line and how to make it work longer time for you. And the last but not least thing that we have to mention is how to take care of your lines so they can stay longer time with you. First of all, of course, you know, salty water is damaging anything a lot, and the best way to keep your lines clean is after each fishing you usually have a bottle of drinking water in your car, or you always keep some fresh water with you. Just after you finished fishing session, just rinse it with the water, close your drag on your reel, and rinse your reel and your braided line with the water, which will help to remove the salt that you accumulated during your fishing trip. The second one, of course, is after a while, after a couple of fishing trips, you might use complete wash of your line, which is done by respooling your line. For example, you might buy some very cheap reels. You know, there is a lot of budget reels available in the market which you can use just for respooling, and at the same time there is specific respooling machines and respooling items which you can use, and run your line through the bucket of water. So that's very basic. So you will put your line, for example, you are respooling it to the other reel or other bobbin, and you just drop something heavy with your line down, so your line just goes through the water and it will just wash completely your line, so remove all the salts that it has already, and your line will be perfect as new. And the third thing, of course, usually lines comes in 200 and 300 meters, which and the mostly you're gonna use is 100, 150 meters of that line, and the 50 meters, it will be just extra meters that you have, or 150 meters, and just staying on the bottom of the spool as the backing for that line. And after a while, it will just, you know, it will be the new line just lying down. And what you do after 1 month of usage of your reel, of couple of months, it depends how often you go fishing, you can go on and respool your line. So just change the sides, whatever you are using first, you can spool it back to, you know, as a backing, and the new line will be on the top, and you will have completely new line you can use for the rest of the time. And this will let you, you know, use the braided line for a longer period of time. And if you take a good care of that, it you can use the line for the whole season, or maybe even 2 seasons. And also very important is to keep checking the guides, the ceramic guides that you have on your rods, because ceramic guides are very sensitive and very fragile. If you especially are doing a lot of rock fishing and accidentally maybe hit the rock somewhere in the process of twitching or jigging, or whenever you bring the fish and you put rod down, just keep checking the guides, because ceramic guides might get some cracks, and these cracks will damage your line. And if the crack is a bit more deeper, it will just get your lines cut on the cast. And also check your reels. Take care of your reels and check the reels, because specifically when you're putting them on the stone or some kind of very rough structure, the sides of the reels where the line starts running, it will get some scratches, and these scratches might damage the line while you're casting or while you're retrieving. So if you have this kind of small scratches or anything, just use sandpaper to polish these areas of the reel, which will make them smooth and will not damage your line. And I think this was the important parts that we wanted to explain regarding the braided line, what kind of braided line you want to use. And it will, hopefully it will make you easier to make your decisions on what lines to choose and what line to use for different type of fishing. And stay tuned. If you like the video, press the like button, and we are coming back with more videos soon on explaining all the type of gear and how to choose them. Thank you very much.